My name is Lore Michel. No, this is not Lore Michel, it's Laura Robinson, but I was Lore Michel and was born in Cologne in Germany in 1924, and I'm now 90 years old. I was at a Jewish grammar school in Cologne, in Gymnasium, and in 1938 most of us had to leave this gymnasium because it had to close, and the headmaster took some of the pupils to England, and I was on the list for coming over as a child on the Kindertransport. And parents were allowed to come to the station, but not too close to the train. They waited downstairs. The Nazis didn't want any scenes of misery and crying. Until then, I may add that I had a reasonably happy life, really. It was only towards the end that we had people spitting at us in the street and saying nasty things. And then it got very unpleasant, and of course our father couldn't work anymore. He had several years when he couldn't do any work, and I arrived by train at Liverpool Street, and my brother was there. And my brother met me. His English, he assumed, was very much better than mine, and he got me to read a sign up on the in the station, which said, Bovril is good for you. So I had to read this, and I read, Bovril is good for you. And my brother said, oh my God, we're going to have trouble with you. And he thought he was going to have a lot of trouble with my poor accent. But in fact, it wasn't all that bad. And I had heard that Cambridge had a very good refugee committee, and I asked my brother to go and see them, to see if he could do anything for me. And he went, and Mrs. Hutton was on duty on that day, and he said to her, my sister is 15, and she's not being sent to school, she's just doing housework, and she's not very happy, and she wonders whether you might have anyone here in Cambridge who could take her in. And Mrs. Hutton said immediately, that is a disgrace. Let her come to our house for Christmas, and if we think she's worth educating, we will keep her. So for Christmas, I travelled we were then in Bournemouth, I think, from Bournemouth to Cambridge, and I was on very best behaviour for a few days, and they said that I could stay, and then they would send me to the grammar school, and this was for me, of course, a great joy. And a strange thing happened. My father, we were still corresponding then, my parents were still in Germany at the time. I wrote to my father, this is just wonderful, these marvelous people have offered to take me in. Father wrote back immediately and said, you can't accept that because they haven't guaranteed you. They might just one day say, sorry, we don't like you anymore, go back to the people who guaranteed you. And Professor Hutton was very upset about that, and he wrote a beautiful letter to my father, and my father was immediately very happy, and the family were comforted and felt very, very pleased about it all. And then I went to school in Cambridge, and that was really lovely. The house was very large and beautiful, a huge garden. It was a very comfortable way of living. We had central heating, it was beautifully warm. Beautiful, huge flowers everywhere. Mrs. Hutton loved flowers, and she had enormous gladioli in the fireplace always. A house of distinction, and great joy to be there. And I was given a little room to myself, which had a little wash basin in it, and the safe was covered up, and was my desk, my table, bedside table. And I was very, very happy there. And I was very happy at school too, and I did well. I must say the girls were delightful. I had no trouble at all. And there was one other girl, Susie Peretz, she was in my class, and we were both well accepted and always happy, and yeah, we had a very good life there. The table, they had a large table for meals. We all collected at dinner time at night, and Professor Hutton sat there, Mrs. Hutton sat there, and the 2 German children there and 2 German children there. And I think that this was a great sacrifice on their part. their freedom and their life was changed by having all of us in the house, and I think I admire them very greatly for that. I think they felt that they must help. The Jewish committee was very active. I mean, the committee for children was very active in Cambridge, wasn't it, with Mrs. Burkill and all the other fabulous ladies who were working it, and I think they did a wonderful job. And one girl who was a little older than we were got a job, and she was sharing the big bedroom with another girl, two of them in there, and I had my little room. And the housekeeper was upstairs in the loft, in this roof. She had a beautiful room up there. And when this other girl got the job, Mrs. Hutton said to me, "I regret that you will have to move out of your room into the other room and share it with Ilse, because Hannah, who has now got a job, will pay me £2 a week for the room." And I said, "Oh," I was really unhappy, but she said, "Well, I'm afraid that's only fair." And I couldn't see that was fair. But it was fair, of course. Now I can see it. But then I didn't see it, and I was very cross. But I had to put up with it. Cambridge was beautiful. We used to go to concerts at the Arts Theatre, didn't we? And once I went to a matinee when I was supposed to be doing biology revision in the library. And when the play was finished, as I came out, my form teacher, Miss Scott, was standing at the cash desk buying herself a ticket, and she saw me coming out of the theatre, and she knew I wasn't supposed to be there, and she said, "Laura, I'm very surprised at you. You will lose your job of being librarian." And that was a terrible blow. But one was rather naughty in those days and did things that one shouldn't have done. Yes, the 55 Club was in Hills Road, and it was just a normal, fairly large house where the Jewish refugees used to collect at the weekend, perhaps. Or I think it was open at any time. It was a house where one could go if one had any problems. And also we had dances there and all sorts of things. And I wasn't very good at dancing, so I didn't go for that. But one did go, and it was a lovely place to get together with other people and to meet your friends. And I made many friends there. Some of my best friends came with me nursing in the same hospital. I think there were about 6 of us who came from Cambridge. And it was a lovely feeling to have this homely feeling about one's life, that one, not having a family of one's own, one had suddenly a new family. It's good. It was a wonderful time. I think that our time in Cambridge was almost magic. It was, the family was so charming and so marvelous to us, and it was something that we hadn't met before, in a way. They allowed me to go to synagogue if I wanted to. Oh, allowed me, of course, yes. On a Saturday morning I could go, and quite a lot of students were there, and made eyes at the students, but didn't catch one. But there were also quite a few girls, and that was nice, yeah. But I also went to church with Mrs. Hutton quite often. She went to the Round Church, where there was a very good preacher called Max Warren. Have you heard of him? No? She loved hearing him, and we often went there. There was no barrier of any kind. Mrs. Hutton had a wonderful library too. She loved Virginia Woolf. And when I had to write essays at school, I used a book of hers which was called The Waves by Virginia Woolf, and I copied her style. And my teacher didn't realize that I was copying The Waves style, and I always got brilliant or excellent. And the class would think, how can she be excellent? She's a foreigner, she's not even English. And my essays were really good because I adopted the style of Virginia Woolf. And I was just lucky that Miss Scott didn't know. I don't know, I have the greatest admiration for things that happened to me in Cambridge, and she was very correct, she was very kind. She found it, she couldn't have been your mother. She found it difficult to get too close. At one time, I had to have a telling off about something. I was not willing to come home from Professor Parks's house. And I adored him. He was so gorgeous. And I went fruit picking in his house, in his garden. And every time I had a chance to do that, I went, because he was a friend of my brother's and myself. And Mrs. Hutton telephoned and said, "Laura, you've forgotten that Eva is out tonight. You must come home at once." So I had to come home and look after the dog and help with the supper and things like that. She felt that she had enough people there to help her. Why should she do the supper when we were all there? She was quite right, of course, but that I did resent too. That was, And then when I was 17, I went to Hillingdon County Hospital to do the nursing course, and there were several friends of mine there from Cambridge, and I made some more friends there. But Mrs. Hutton always asked me to come and be there when they went on holiday, and particularly when I got married, which was immediately after nursing. We always looked after the house. They used to go for a month or so to South Africa, and they loved that. And then we would come and look after the house and look after the dog, and the gardener was there and the cleaner was there. It was no hardship. It was wonderful. It was a life, a very easy, gorgeous life. Mrs. Hutton was looking after a post in Trumpington, a first aid post. And every time the sirens went off at night or in the daytime, any time, she would put on a little suit, leap onto her little motorbike. She was only a little woman. She was not leaping very, but she was full of life and full of go. Leap onto her little motorbike and rush out to Trumpington. I'm on duty, and she would work there. Oh yes, this is very true. She gave her time, she gave everything. She was a giver, yeah. That was also wonderful. In the middle of the night, the siren would go off and we would hear this noise of Mrs. Hutton putting on her big shoe galoshes and her suit and the little motorbike going like that, and off she went, yes. She was great.